Welcome to Victory Life Today. I'm Al Buhrke.
And I'm Angie Buhrke. Thanks so much for joining us today. We've got a great message on offense, because offense is big, Al, not only in the world, but in the body of Christ.
Bigger in the church.
It really, really is, and it's so sad. And but there's a way to stay free from it. There's a way that it won't affect you, you know. But
like in Matthew 11, the common theme is this offense thing, and it's talking about, John the Baptist was in prison, and goes on to talk about that. And and why was he in prison?
Yeah,
why
let's start with John the Baptist
was in prison. So let's just start right there. I think if I was to title this message, it would be offense, or don't be offended, no matter what.
Offense, take it or leave it.
Because there you go.
Because I want to tell you something, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
Are you going to be offended or not? Or if you are you going to stay offended?
There's 100 opportunities a day to be offended.
Yes. And what I really want to tell you guys is take it personally. I really, and I might remind you about this throughout the teaching, but I want you to take it personally for you, because really right away when we talk about offense, we think of the other person who's offensive. Well, right away we think of
you offended.
Or that you feel offended by something, which is what we're going to talk about. But I want you to take it personally. Just think of you during this teaching, because this is what I want you free. Okay, you are the ones that tuned in to get help, and I want you free. We both do. So
in Matthew 14, 3-5, he says, this is John the Baptist.
Well, no, this is paraphrase, though, yeah.
Yeah, this is a paraphrase. John rebuked the king for living in adultery with his brother's wife. And so Herod put him in prison.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Well, okay, so the point is, why did Herod...
He was offended.
And so was Herodias, his mistress.
Sure.
Yep. They both got offended at him, mad, because he was bringing truth to them about something they were doing. He was exposing them, and it's not fun to get exposed.
No, it's no fun at all.
Okay.
But I maintain John the Baptist, really, this guy was the king. So he was under the king's authority. You could make the case he never should have said anything to the king. Whatever the king's going to do, he does. And he never would have wound up in jail. So what happens is we get out there and we're rebuking people that we shouldn't be rebuking.
Right.
They get offended at us, and then you wonder why you wound up in trouble. When you should have respected your authority.
Absolutely. So we should know our place and stay in our place, and not just, and even if he did have the right to do that, people bring things to me and to you, and sometimes people say, well, you do that all the time, and we could react one or two ways. We could go, well, thanks, I won't do that anymore. Or, we get all ruffled and we go, well, no, I don't. And you're offended right away. And we need to be teachable. If we're going to, and God can use that's right, God can use the lowest of the lowest of the lowest to teach you something. So don't ever say, well, what do you know? Or you're only 15.
Or he can use a donkey. He can use a donkey.
Yep. That's right, he did.
Right? I know somebody that you spoke to once about a problem, and she went back and went to the Lord. And see, that's a person who's correctable.
Absolutely,
she went back, and the Lord explained her things, and she changed. She didn't take offense.
She was,
and the fruit was fantastic.
Absolutely,
what came out of that.
That's right. And she wanted to be pleasing to the Lord. But I guess King Herod didn't give a rip.
No, King Herod didn't care.
So they threw him in jail.
I almost wonder sometimes, we as the church, should we be rebuking the world? We should be operating within the church, saying this is right and this is wrong, and that's fine. But sometimes the world, they just could care less. And I don't know, is it our place?
You know what I think? I think King Herod knew he was doing wrong.
Of course he did.
I think
and he didn't like it when he got exposed.
Yeah, I don't think we should be so quick to bring people's sins out, because believe me, they already know. You know when you're doing wrong. You know when you're doing something wrong, whether it's little or big. You have a conscience. And so they already know. So why bring it up? I pray for them. I think that's way more powerful than anything else anyway. But anyway, so the offense begins. Okay, and we have to be correctable. You're right. So now John the Baptist is in prison, and he sends his disciples to Jesus, because he hears about this Jesus, whom he baptized, by the way. And he said, go make sure that this is the same Jesus that I baptized. And why did he do that? Because he figured if he was, Why doesn't he get me out of prison?
Oh, yeah.
An offense, right? John the Baptist had to be offended. And Jesus proves it later. And so the disciples of John come to Jesus and say, well, are you the Christ? Are you the one that everybody's talking about? And Jesus answers with the written word. Oh, I love it because you can't go wrong with the written word. And he said, look, the blind see, the lame walk, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised. And then he says this in verse 6, Al, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. So Jesus knew that John was offended at him. And he was simply offended because John figured, man, we had this great relationship.
Well,
I came to prepare your way.
He was an awesome man of God. And it's like, why aren't you fixing this?
Exactly. That's what I think.
I maintain sometimes he didn't because he shouldn't have done what he did to the king. He should have left the king. I don't know that. It's just my little thinking about that. But anyway, he offended at Jesus. It's like, what? The lame walk, big deal. I'm in prison. Get me out of this place.
And actually, what other thing that it was actually persecution too, because he was speaking truth. He told the king, look, you're not doing right. And he got persecuted for it big time. So that we're promised. We're promised persecution in this life if we want to live godly in Christ Jesus. So there's more of an offense. And now in Matthew 16-19, it reveals another offense. And it says that John the Baptist came mourning for the people, and because he was trying to get them to repent. And the people were offended at John. Okay? And then they even said that he had a devil in him.
Yeah.
And then it also says that Jesus came filled with joy and the answer to everyone's life, and they were offended at his message too.
That was no good either, no matter what, it's no good.
They were. This whole chapter is on people being offended. And they called Jesus a glutton and a drunk.
Offense is so easy to take. I was watching a TV show, and there was a minister on the show. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how you better watch out how you live, buddy. God's going to get you for your sin. And I'm watching this, and the guy was so fat, he couldn't even sit in the chair. He was like laying out.
Jeez.
And I'm sitting there going, I'm so offended at this guy. Who are you to tell me this when you can't even control this? And you know what? The Lord just said, this is just none of your business. Just don't be offended. Your job is to love them, regardless of what they're doing.
I think you were more offended because he wasn't speaking truth.
Well, he wasn't speaking the truth, and he was sitting there, and in other words,
attitude.
The very thing he was talking about, you better not do, he was doing. In my opinion.
Yes.
In other words, he was saying, you better watch your sin, and to me, that gluttony was a sin.
Absolutely.
Well, who are you to say that? And you know what? I just said, you know what, Lord, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to get offended. I'm not going to give the devil I'm not going to arm the devil with information to take me out.
That's right.
And I just said, well, whatever he does, it's fine with me. That's his life.
That's right.
And that's what you have to do sometimes so you don't get offended. You just have to say, you know what? Maybe God's talking to me. Maybe God was telling me to lose weight.
That could have been. Well, that's a good point because, again, God can use anyone. And even if he was preaching the wrong thing and it wasn't truth, he could still be speaking to you around don't get like that. He really could. He uses everything. And again, we talked about this recently, the condition of the heart. If your heart is willing to receive correction from God through anyone at any time, then you can actually get a message for yourself there and not be offended. Just take it for what you could gain from it.
If I was to love him unconditionally, I wouldn't even see that he was so fat. I would just sort of went on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the problem was me. I was getting offended. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And I had to blow that off because that offense working in me spirals downhill.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you got another problem. And then you have another problem, and you're just letting the devil in the mix. And that's not a good idea.
And it makes things worse. And then in verses 20-22, Jesus starts criticizing Chorazin and Bethsaida, where he did most of his mighty works. He did many miracles in these towns, but he saw that their hearts were hardened, and he started criticizing them because they saw his miracles. And they still didn't receive him. They still did not repent. Why? Because they got offended at his message. Because they were bent on staying the way they wanted to stay, believing that they were right, and they weren't going to take anything from Jesus. They weren't going to just listen to him. So they got offended.
Well, some people are so offended at God. If you're like John the Baptist and you say repent, they're mad at you. And if you like Jesus and say, hey, come to be a blessing to you, they're offended at that too.
Well, what's wrong with us? We don't need. I remember somebody gave an invitation in a church years ago. Pastor, he preached a good message. He was a guest speaker, and he gave an invitation. Do you know that the people that walked out of that church, it was about 400 people there that morning, they were offended. How dare he think we're unsaved?
Yeah, most of them weren't saved too. I know that church.
Many were. Whatever it was, but they were absolutely offended that somebody would give a salvation message. What if there was one person that actually got saved?
Isn't that awesome?
But they weren't there, only thinking about themselves, highly offended. This is a holy church. How could they? I could not believe it.
I remember that church and that group. They were easily offended there.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes. And then in verse 23, Jesus rebukes the town of Capernaum for the same reason. They were just discarding his miracles and what he was saying about life and that they needed to be born again. They became offended and they never repented. Look, if you're going to stay in offense, you're not going to get anywhere. You can't get anywhere unless you have this openness. Now, you don't have to agree with everything because some of the offenses, even if they're right, even if people are pointing out something to you, you shouldn't get offended. You should receive that correction.
It might be time to receive correction. It might be time to listen to what they have to say and go back to God and spend some time in prayer saying, Lord, are they right? You know what I mean? Maybe.
Do you know, just this week, somebody said to me, I said something, just one thing. And they said, that was pretty condescending. And I said, honestly, Al, I said, it was. I said, I didn't even think,
they took it wrong.
I didn't no, because they didn't know what it's, mannerisms are,
sure.
could, and that doesn't mean that that's what you really mean, okay? But I said, well, I didn't mean it to be that way. And then I walked away and I went to the Lord right away. And I said, well, it's just a little thing, But he didn't, I just knew that it would be better for the both of us if I went back and I said, look, I'm sorry. If I did that, I really didn't realize it. So we got to fess up too sometimes when we make
sometimes
mistakes.
people offend you and they don't even know they offended you and they never intended to offend you.
Absolutely.
They just said something and moved on and you're all
you get misunderstood.
So what are some of the signs of when we're offended or people who are offended?
People that actually live offended.
Yeah.
As people are offended, there are a lot of people that stay offended. And not just...
In the church is where most of them are. I always say your greatest source of offense, if you want to be offended, your greatest source of offense is in the church. Because the devil's going to work through people that whoever he can work through. And the devil's always trying to offend you at that church you're going to over something, because no church does it perfect in your mind. And what he's trying to do is get you out of the church, get you offended, get you out of Christianity. Yeah. So your number one place, you're more likely to be offended in the church than you are in the world, believe it or not.
No, I do believe it. You know why? There are many church splits.
All the time. Why?
And it's all about offense.
All the time.
Jealousy, offense, and wow.
So,
wow, that must break God's heart.
So how do you know you're offended, or people who are offended, they take things personal or too personal? So, like you said, sometimes you could be preaching, you're just preaching a crowd, and they take it personal. It's like, I'm not preaching to you, I'm just preaching a message. They take it all personal, all huffy-puffy, walking out.
And, the pastor didn't shake my hand this morning. Oh, man, that goes on so much. I mean, he's got 1,500 people hands to shake, I mean, it's give him a break.
Yeah, so why didn't he come right over to me and shake my hand and acknowledge who I am? Well, what's that got to do with the price of the ticket? It's just not important.
And, excuse me, Al, a good point is a lot of people feel justified in that because I'm the biggest giver in this church and they never even sent me a thank you card. I'll tell you what, the Lord showed me a long time ago, no matter what you give, Do not expect, nobody owes you anything, you know, and that made me free. Nobody owes me anything, not even a thank you, because he thanks me, and that's the only one that I prefer anyway.
You know, I was in a church, talk about you owe me, and these people had donated like an organ, a small little organ thing, and they said, don't move this organ because it's going to ruin it. Don't ask me where that came from. Well, they were doing a play. You know, months later, they were doing a play and they had to move the organ.
Yeah.
And they got all offended about moving this organ. And like you said, that's not your call. Once you donated that organ to the church, whatever they do with it is their business. They don't owe you anything. You're not in control of this thing anymore. You gave it to them.
That's a good point. Either you
and
give
they
it or
were
you
all
don't.
offended over all of this. And I was sitting there going like, I would have moved it too. We got to do a play. What are you going to do? Leave an organ in the middle of a play with about Moses, with everybody walking with canes, and there's an organ,
and the kids banging the organ with the cane.
Yeah, it's got to be moved. And I just couldn't understand that. But those people, they were easily offended in that church. They were almost looking for it. And I remember I was preaching in that church, and I felt like, man, I was walking on eggs with them. You never knew what you were going to say. And I'm really good at offending people, especially when I'm preaching.
And you offend yourself the most.
And I offend myself all the time. So anyway.
But what Al was saying, don't take things so personally like it's an attack against you. Although King Herod, that was an attack against him. But really, don't take things so. But I still, again, like I said before at the beginning of this, I want you to take this personally as a good thing, to help you grow, to help you get to the next level. Because living in offense, oh my God, it's just awful. I mean, I remember years and years ago when we were first married, I was so offended at this couple. And I don't even know if it was rightfully so, to be honest with you. I was just offended, mad. I didn't want anything to do with them. I'm gathering my little army over here. And I remember I wrote a letter to them, and it was like 4 pages. And you know, I stewed over that letter. I wasn't born again, okay? But I was a churchgoer, okay? But I stewed over that letter, and I read it every single day, several times a day, making it better, making it harder, harsher. And I ended up not sending that letter because I did know God somewhat, and I knew that it wasn't going to accomplish anything. And today we're like fine with each other, but it's just like I held on to that offense, and it was so wrong, and it was unhealthy for me and unhealthy for you, and it just wasn't good. You
know, people get offended because when you, I would say, call them on their sin, say it that way. That's what happened to Herod. He was called out on his sin. Instead of saying, yeah, you're right. Because David did say, you're right. When the prophet came to him and said, you did this, he goes, you're right, I did it.
Do you know what? That's why I think God called him a man after his own heart.
That's right.
Because David agreed with God.
He was honest.
That's exactly right. If Herod would have agreed with God, you're right, this is a sin, then it would have been better. And he could have been, But
the world will do that, and many people in the church will do that. And it's like with Herod, instead of saying you're right, they'll attack. They get offended and attack. And that's what he did to John the Baptist. He attacked him. He threw him in jail. So we have to be so careful. Sometimes God's bringing correction through a person.
How else is he going to do it?
How else is he going to do it?
Well.
And then when it's exposed, the first thing you need to do is, instead of being offended, say, you're right. You know, I've had people that they would ask me questions. They'd say, as a pastor, you know, what about this and what about that? And when I began to give them the correct answer, they'd get mad at me. And they'd get offended at me.
Well, they're asking you.
That's what I'm saying. Well, what'd you ask me for? I just told you what the answer to your problem is, and you didn't want to hear it, so they got mad at me. All the time.
Oh, that reminds me of when the kids were in school and they were doing their math, our children. And this happened all the time. And they would say, Mom, help me with this math or English or whatever, and what word do I put in there, or what number is this? And I would show them the whole thing and everything. They go, that's not the way to do it.
I know. They asked you how to do it.
Okay.
No one told them how to do it. That was no good.
I said, you're on your own. And what about taking things too sensitive? Sensitive. Like you go like this, and they go, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, all touchy-feely.
People, because their focus is on themselves and protecting themselves. And maybe some of you out there have been hurt in the past. Maybe you've been betrayed in the past, and so you don't trust people. Well, you may not ever trust those people, but you still need to trust people and trust God to send you to the right people. You know, but a lot of times we become so like sensitive. It's like because you've been hurt. And I'm not minimizing the hurt. I'm not minimizing the betrayal, but God is your healer. And he can heal you where you don't have to live that way, where you're so every
Well, they
little
become
thing.
overly guarded.
Yes, they're protecting
You
themselves.
say anything to them and they're, oh, watch out. What are you saying against me? What are you doing?
Because it's been done to
You
them.
know what else? It's so into themselves
Yeah.
and they're into their pride. That's why they can't just be open and say, yeah, that's me. I did that. But, you know, many times people are hurt and I understand all of that.
You know, Al, the more I walk with the Lord, the more humble, it's easier and easier for me to just be humble and just be real. Like
you're
when I went back
growing
in
up.
and I said, look, I'm sorry, I never even wanted to do anything like that. And really, I didn't even know I was. And most of the time when people offend others, they don't even know it.
I never take offense anymore. Anything that happens to me, I instantly sit back and say, Lord, I forgive that person. I'm not going to keep that there. I'm not giving the devil any room in my life.
Yeah.
Because he wants that offense because now he can work it and work it and work it. So in fact, I forgive so fast, I don't even know that I forgave him.
Well,
It's just
no, that's really
instantaneous. I have
good.
no guile against anybody.
That's you really don't. You really don't.
That doesn't mean I'm happy about a situation, but I'm just not going to take the offense. And then, you know, sometimes the devil tries to get me and, you know, I might, but then I back off and say, you know what? They're just trying to live too.
And because your focus is between you and God, it's like when people offend me, I literally put God in front of my face. And I
would
go, okay,
God
what's
say?
really important here?
What would Jesus
And you
say?
know, God wants you to feel sorry for those people because they're all stressed out and they're just coming against you or whatever, you know.
Another big one is this victim mentality.
Oh,
we have whole groups
yes.
of people that hate other groups of people who hate other groups of people because they've got this victim mentality that they've been wronged. Well, we've all been wronged.
Yeah.
And one of the things the devil does is when you've been wronged, he goes, you know, Al, you're the only one. You're the only one that has this problem, has been victimized, you know, and you go, yeah, I'm the only one. Oh, no, poor me. The devil's trying to get you into the pity party and offense. Everyone's been through what you've been through.
That's exactly right. That's why I always tell you, you're not the only one.
I know, you have to remind me.
No, I'm only kidding. But we do that. We do that to each other to keep us accountable and to bring to remembrance, because sometimes we get so caught up in things. Like Al goes, you think you're the only one? No. When I say something, Al goes, oh yeah, I had that too. I can't even have my time. I can't even have my time. But anyway, it's true.
This
you know, you're
victim
not.
mentality is a big thing. And in this culture today in America, this victim mentality is a big, big thing. I've been wronged, I've been wronged, I've been wronged. And
Wow.
the devil uses it to take you down. And he gets you into this constant
Woe is me.
victim
I'm gonna have
mentality. As long as you have a victim mentality, you'll never do anything with your life because all your problems were caused by somebody else.
You won't take accountability,
You won't take
responsibility
accountability.
for anything, because it's always the other person's fault, and I'm always the victim.
Yeah, I know in my own life, I've blamed other people for things in my life. Oh, because they did this and because they did that. I never looked at the fact that I was lazy. That just seems to be okay. But I'm looking at all these things that they did wrong to me and everything, but I'm perfect.
Yeah, I think
I do it right.
I think we have ourselves on our mind way too much.
Way too much.
But anyway, talking about being a victim, look at this. Romans 8:37 says this: we're more than conquerors. We are more than conquerors.
So why are you victim?
You can't have a victim mentality and be a conqueror, or more than a conqueror at the same time. It does. Which one do you want? But people just like they.
Oh, yeah. You know, if you've been beat up and you've got this victim mentality and you're all beat down, you have to understand that you are more than a conqueror. Now, you have to start somewhere. Okay, so you're beat down, but you have to get this thinking in you that you're more than a conqueror, and you have to start coming out of that. It's you and God. It's not you and everybody else. Forget them. It doesn't matter what they've done to you and how they offended you.
Well, tell them what you always say on that day when you stand before the Lord.
Oh, the Lord showed this.
So
I
good.
was so upset one day about things that were going on in my life, and people, oh Lord, look what this one did to me, and look what that one did to me, and they beat me up. And the Lord simply just said this to me. He said, listen, Al, on Judgment Day, when you stand before me, those people aren't going to be there. Don't worry about them.
So
Don't
good.
think about them. Just think
That's
about
so
you
good.
and me and our relationship. You're more than a conqueror. Now, if you'll start.
That's so good.
And it was like, that changed my whole life, because it was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
I
we're
get
worried
it.
about all these people, and then
I don't even need them. I don't care who they are. You know, like one ethnic group against another. I don't even need you. I don't care what you think of me. I got God on my side, and I'm going on.
Right, because if we stay offended, we're really under their control.
You got
They've
it.
got control over us. It's crazy. Well, we want to encourage you to go to victorylifeministries.org. We have several resources there that we know will help you. And we are also now on demand, so you could click that watch button and find any of our teachings on there anytime you'd like. And if you like this one, you can click that share button at the bottom of your screen and send it to your friends. We would appreciate all of that, won't we? Mm-hmm. We want to get the word out to as many people as we can. So we thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, victory is always yours through Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.
For years, I have been living my life feeling ashamed, condemned, and full of regrets. I felt I was a disappointment to God in so many ways. I hated myself and who I had become because I believed all the lies the devil was telling me. I was constantly sizing up my life through the lives of others, assuming God must be mad at me for something I did along the way. Angie's book, God's Not Mad at You, helped me understand what God's grace truly means. Her book taught me that God is never mad at me. I now have a clear understanding of what it means to live by His grace. This book helped me in so many ways, but most importantly, it taught me to let go of guilt and condemnation because God has already forgiven all my past, present, and future sins. He loves me and He has wonderful things planned for me. Thank you, Victory Life Ministries. This book has truly blessed my life.
Al and Angie Buhrke are the founders of Victory Life Ministries, an organization that is designed to help you live your best life so that you would be inspired and know that God will fulfill all of your needs according to His purpose. Live a life set ablaze by faith, filled with purpose. Live life above your circumstance.